Hey, what's already? Welcome back to News Dose. And have you ever noticed that a lot of people kind of overreact to Xbox news and, they like to twist it into their ultimate demise? Well, that's been happening yet again today. And I want to talk about that because I don't think that this is nearly as big of a story as some people are necessarily making out to be. But I will say that I am very interested in how Xbox approaches this specific plan. So we're going to get into all of that today, as well as a big game that's unfortunately going to miss the Nintendo Switch 2. So make sure to stay tuned for that as well. But first, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go get right into things, though, starting off with a surprise drop for the Switch 2 and its GameCube online subscription, being Fire Emblem Path of the Radiance. And this is really an incredible inclusion. Obviously, Fire Emblem has grown into a pretty big series for Nintendo, especially with the rehouses from last generation. And I'm really looking forward to Fortune's Weave for later this year. It's actually one of my most anticipated games. But Path of Radiance is a fan favorite. If anything else, it's widely viewed to be one of, if not the best story for really any Fire Emblem title, just period. So if you like the Fire Emblem series, or if you just like tactical RPGs, then I think Path of Radiance is a must-play game. Obviously, this genre has aged incredibly well, so go check it out because you can play it right now if you have a Switch Online subscription and the Switch 2. Now, speaking of Nintendo, though, they had a fairly busy day, which also included a new Joy-Con set for the Switch 2, which is actually their first new set this generation. The only thing, though, is that fans aren't exactly overly pleased with the new design, and, well, that's because, as you can see here, not much has changed. The shells themselves are still that grayish black color, and then they just changed the inline colors to purple and I guess a bluish-looking green color. And that's the thing about this, because when you have these things connected to the Switch 2, well, you don't really see those magnetic parts for the most part, and really you don't see much of the joystick colors either. So it's a very tame change, and fans clearly wanted more for the first new design. Maybe change the actual shells themselves. That seems fairly obvious because, that's going to be a lot more noticeable. And just to make things worse, yeah, they're charging $100 for the new set, which is kind of ridiculous. It's kind of strange for me to say this, but usually I complain about Sony's controller designs. A lot of their designs have not wowed me this past generation, but just earlier this week, they really impressed me with their new Hyper Pop design. I really like those. I'll go and flash those on screen here, but yet here we are with Nintendo, and it's kind of the polar opposite situation. I really couldn't be any less impressed by the new Joy-Con designs. So for now, until Nintendo proves me otherwise, they're going to have to go to the bottom of the totem pole of design controllers for this generation. Oh, and we also got a new announcement for the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series that I think is going a bit under the radar right now. This is Duskfade, which is a new 3D action platformer inspired by the likes of Kingdom Hearts and Jak and Daxter. Those are two excellent franchises to be inspired by, and for that matter, they're two fan favorites, especially for the PlayStation community. So I think it's a really smart call to launch it on consoles day one as well. It was already announced for Steam as is, but hopefully this will pay off for the studio. A lot of that, though, will of course depend on if it's actually good, and at the very least, I think the trailer looks fairly solid. I definitely need to see more of it, but I'm going to go ahead and add it to my wish list and just kind of hope that it meets expectations. Kingdom Hearts is still an active franchise, but Jak and Daxter, on the other hand, that's a series that I really miss, and I'm just hoping that Duskfade can kind of scratch that itch. All right, now let's just go talk about Xbox and the story that has the internet on high alert, which I think is kind of crazy. I'll circle back to that in a moment, but what's happening here is that VGC reported this in a recent article. They said that Fable was announced in 2020 as a part of the Xbox Game Showcase. The game, which is a reboot of the Lionhead RPG series, doesn't currently have a release date. It's understood Fable is also in development for PlayStation 5. And people are running with this story online, but I was just kind of thinking, Is this really surprising by this point? Honestly, my expectation is that every Xbox game that's in development also has a PlayStation 5 version in development as well. I believe that's the case for Forza Horizon 6, Gears of War E-Day, the next Halo game, and so on and so forth. I think the bigger question is, when are they going to launch on the PlayStation 5? Because that's where Xbox has been very inconsistent. And I'm not really sure if that's because studios didn't have a PlayStation 5 version prepared earlier in development because they were originally planning them to be exclusives, or if it's just because Xbox wants to have timed exclusivity for certain franchises. So as an example, if you look at last year, they launched The Outer Worlds 2, Ninja Gaiden 4, and Doom: The Dark Ages as multi-platform titles. However, as we've since learned, South of Midnight and Avowed were one-year timed exclusives for Xbox. And the difference between those games and the multi-platform titles is that Avowed and South of Midnight have never had a history on PlayStation. So that makes me wonder if they're going to keep a lot of their Xbox IP, a new IP, as at least timed exclusives. So games like Fable, Forza Horizon 6, and Gears of War E-Day. The only issue with that argument is that Halo Campaign Evolved is going to launch on PlayStation 5 day one. But to be fair, they might view that a little bit differently because it's a remake rather than a brand new game. So that's where their inconsistency starts to come in, which, that can be frustrating for fans all on its own. Xbox's inconsistent messaging has always been a sticking point for a lot of people, but I just think in this case, it's really not shocking to hear that Fable is in development for the PlayStation 5. Again, I think the more important question that people need to ask, not only for Fable, but for all of their games, is whether or not they're going to be at least timed exclusives or not. And that's something that this article did not answer. And that's why I feel like some people are maybe overreacting, because I don't think the news itself is surprising. I think it would be more surprising if they said it's coming day one, which we currently don't know that answer. Now, we could learn more about this later in the month when they reveal their deep dive of Fable at the Xbox Developer Direct. But in the meantime, I want to hear from you all in which strategy you would prefer from Xbox. Do you think they should do timed exclusives, or do you think that they should launch their games on PlayStation day one from this point forward? Now, I'm more so in the mindset of timed exclusives because I think that would give their fan base more reason to buy into their future hardware and things like Game Pass. But I will say that there was an article earlier this week that revealed that despite Xbox has a lower install base than PlayStation, they actually do compete very well with PlayStation in terms of games sold and players for certain genres. So that tells us that the Xbox community, while yes, is smaller, they're still very active in playing games on Xbox consoles. And that's also very important. Attach rate is an important metric, so who knows? Xbox has a strategy that we've never really seen before from a console maker, but as long as their user base is active and they're making a lot of money, then I'm sure Xbox is probably happy, and that's exactly why they're also making another console. Nonetheless, though, let me know which strategy you would prefer from them in the comments below. Now, one last thing before we go, though, because unfortunately a massive game will miss the Switch 2, or at least for now, and that's Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah, I know a lot of Nintendo fans had been hoping for a port because it's widely believed to be an all-time great RPG, and also because Larian has already shown their support for the Switch 2 with the recent updated Divinity Original Sin 2. But in this case, it's not sounding too likely that Baldur's Gate 3 will follow. However, the silver lining to this news is that's not necessarily because of Larian Studios. Instead, what's happening here is that in a Reddit AMA, Larian Studios was asked about a Switch 2 port of Baldur's Gate 3, and they responded, "We would have loved to, but it wasn't our decision to make." And that might sound like a really strange response because, well, they are the developer of the game, but Nate the Hate later on clarified what they meant by that. He said that while Larian would love to bring Baldur's Gate 3 to the Switch 2, their relationship with Hasbro Wizards of the Coast is not healthy. Late last year, I heard Baldur's Gate 3 for Switch 2 was not happening. It's a complicated situation and involves their relationship with WOTC. So, there's still a lot of unknown to this situation and what's exactly happening behind the scenes and why Hasbro haven't signed off on a Switch 2 project. And, that's kind of my thing about this situation. I mean, this is obviously terrible news for Switch 2 owners. There's no way around that. But I don't necessarily view the situation as hopeless. I mean, right now, Larian Studios is on record saying they want to do a port. And Hasbro, they're leaving a lot of money on the table by not signing off. So if Hasbro likes money, which I assume they do, they're a business. So I just kind of think that there's a chance that the two could work out whatever problem they might have. I mean, it might take a while, and of course, some of that depends on just how bad their relationship problems are. But again, I don't think it's necessarily a hopeless situation, and I'll just leave it at that. For now, though, what I can definitely say is don't expect any kind of imminent announcement for Baldur's Gate 3 on a Switch 2. It's likely not going to happen in 2026. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.